Imagine being completely alone, your arm pinned by an immovable boulder. No one knows where you are, and the clock of survival begins ticking. Each second, your hope slips away. How far would you go to survive? It all started like any other adventure. I packed my rucksack, excitement bubbling inside me, ready for a solo trek. Without telling anyone, I set off for Utah's Canyonlands National Park. As I drove, I noticed the road signs assuring me that I had arrived at my destination, a place I considered my playground. Taking out my camcorder, I recorded myself, alone and ready for the challenge that awaited me. I couldn't wait any longer. With the desert stretching before me, I eagerly set off on my first bike expedition. The joy of being in nature, isolated and free, made me shout in excitement. The vastness of the desert mirrored my elation. As I cycled through the desert, I decided to film a video diary, explaining that the Blue John Canyon rappel would usually take 4.5 hours. But I set a personal challenge. I'd conquer it in 45 minutes. My competitive nature was always pushing me beyond my limits. The speed, the thrill, the adrenaline, it was addictive. I felt invincible, but reality caught up with me when I lost control and fell off my bike. Instead of stopping, I laughed it off, took a picture of the moment, and kept going. It was just another bruise in the book of adventures. After securing my bike to a tree, I continued on foot, taking a moment to breathe in the canyon's vast beauty. Nature always had a way of making me feel small, yet somehow it empowered me. I crossed paths with two hikers, Christy and Megan, who were lost. In my usual way, I offered to guide them, making friends along the way. We reached the dome together, where I showed them an underground pool, jumping in without hesitation. My excitement was contagious, and soon they joined me, their initial hesitation melting away. They were grateful for the experience, thanking me for making their day memorable. They invited me to a party, which I accepted. But first, I had more to explore. The slot canyons of Blue John Canyon beckoned, and I felt that familiar pull toward adventure. However, as I climbed, disaster struck. A boulder came loose, and before I knew it, my right arm was trapped. Panic surged through me as I tried to free myself, but the boulder wouldn't budge. My shouts echoed into silence. Christy and Megan were long gone, and no one could hear me. The weight of the situation hit me hard. I was alone, completely. I tried to calm myself, focusing on practical solutions. I used my pocket knife to chip away at the rock, but progress was slow. The knife slipped from my grasp, and I had to use a stick to retrieve it. The more I chipped, the more futile it felt. As the hours passed, the weight of my isolation grew heavier. I realized I was trapped not just physically, but mentally. The boulder wasn't just pressing on my arm. It was pressing on my mind. 24 hours passed, and I started to feel the strain. My thoughts began to spiral. Desperation crept in, manifesting in wild ideas, like setting up a pulley with my climbing rope to lift the boulder. But my strength was failing. Dehydration set in, and I began to hallucinate. In those moments, I decided to record myself on my camcorder, documenting my struggle, hoping that someone would find it, that someone would know what happened. It was my way of staying connected, even if only to a camera. That night, I wrapped myself in a rope for warmth, though my thoughts wouldn't let me rest. The next day, I tried again, pulling, chipping, anything to free myself. But my energy was fading, water was scarce, and I knew I had to ration it. I re-recorded myself, sharing my frustrations, my helplessness. With only 150 milliliters of water left, the thought of drinking my own urine crossed my mind. I put some into my Camelback tube, preparing for the worst. By the third day, desperation had fully set in. I could feel my body weakening, and my mind was starting to turn against me. Every thought seemed like a battle. I had no choice but to consider something I never thought I'd face. I would have to amputate my own arm. Using the dull multi-tool I had with me, I tried to break the bones in my trapped arm. The tool was useless. a far cry from the Swiss knife I had foolishly left behind. As I worked, my mind wandered to the what-ifs. What if I had brought a sharper tool? What if I had told someone where I was going? In my video diaries, I rambled on, perhaps more for my sanity than for posterity. I started talking to the camera as if it were a person, a friend. But the reality was sinking in. No one knew I was here. My isolation felt like an ever-tightening noose. The silence of the canyon only amplified my inner chaos. Then came the hallucinations. I saw my family, my parents, my sister. They were with me, talking to me. It was so vivid that for a moment, I believed it was real. On the fourth day, I woke up with an unbearable thirst. My water was gone, and my body was screaming for hydration. I opened my bottle and took a sip, but it wasn't enough. The feeling of desperation gnawed at me as the bottle slipped from my hands. That small, simple mistake felt like the world collapsing. I was beyond thirsty now. I was desperate. And then, the hallucinations of Rana, my ex-girlfriend, began. I could hear her voice, see her face, feel her presence. It was both comforting and cruel. Then, thunder rolled through the canyon. It was real, and it shook me out of my delirium. I scrambled to collect rainwater, thankful for even the smallest chance at survival. But my mind was playing tricks on me again. I started to imagine that this was it. I was going to be saved, that help was just around the corner. But it wasn't. The rain stopped, and reality crashed back down. On the fifth day, things got worse. I turned the camera on myself, but this time it was different. I wasn't just talking to the camera. I was narrating my life, as if I were a newscaster reporting on my own demise. It felt like my mind was fracturing, each piece slipping further away from the reality I once knew. In my final recording, I spoke directly to my parents. I told them how much I loved them, how much I regretted not telling them where I was going. It was my goodbye, my final message, because I didn't think I was going to make it. The hallucinations came back stronger. This time, they pushed me to make a second attempt at amputating my arm. I knew what had to be done, and this time, I had the determination to follow through. Using torque, I managed to break the bones in my arm. I could hear the crack, feel the sickening sensation, but I knew it was my only chance. I had to survive. The pain was unimaginable, but I forced myself to endure it, pushing my body to its absolute limits. Then came the vision of my future son. It was so vivid, so real, that it reignited something inside me. It gave me the strength I didn't know I had. I used the multi-tool, slowly amputating my own arm, fighting through every wave of agony. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I was free. I wrapped the stump to stop the bleeding. And before I left that canyon, I did one last thing. I took a picture of the boulder that had trapped me. It was a symbol of the battle I had fought, and somehow I had won. As I emerged from the canyon, the sunlight hit my face, and I felt a rush of triumph. But the journey wasn't over. I was exhausted, dehydrated, and wounded, but I kept moving. I came across murky water and used it to hydrate myself, knowing that I had to keep going. I didn't stop. The heat was brutal, but something inside me kept pushing me forward. Then I saw them, a family out on a trip. I called out to them, my voice hoarse but desperate. They saw me, and the look on their faces told me that I had made it. Help was finally here. The Utah Highway Patrol arrived just in time, rushing me to the hospital. As I lay there, the realization of what I had survived hit me. In the interviews that followed, I told my story, but it wasn't just about survival. It was about the human spirit, about pushing beyond the limits we think we have. Years later, the hallucination I had of my son turned out to be more than a dream. I married, had a family, and the son I had seen in that moment of despair became a reality. It was as if that vision had been a promise from my mind, telling me that there was a future waiting for me if I could just endure. And yes, I still climb. But now, before every adventure, I leave a note behind. It's a small act of responsibility, that reminds me of the price of isolation. Because no matter how much I love the thrill of adventure, I've learned that the mind can be both your greatest ally and your worst enemy when you're truly alone.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more content like this. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you're ready for the next story, go ahead and click on the next video. See you there.